Obviously, I'd like to start by acknowledging that we're meeting all on different country around Western Australia. I'm here on Noongar Budja, the home of the Whadjuk people, and I'd like to acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging, and encourage anyone who is not or wherever they're meeting and whether they're joining us from to write that into the chat. So today we thought, given there's been lots of changes, we would provide a quick snap briefing update on what's been happening, a bit more for particularly for new people that have joined us, overview of what the Make Renting Fair campaign is, some of the things that we've achieved, what some of the proposed changes and what they mean, and how what our plans are going forward for the campaign. I wanted to introduce some of the people that will be sharing their insights during the webinar. Chantal from Shelter WA. He's also our courageous, fearless and energetic campaign coordinator. Lucy from Wacos, and Zoe, she's an apology from Circle Green Community Legal. So Chantal and I will be providing some of the information that she shared with us. I also wanted to thank everybody here. We've got a really broad range of people on the webinar with us today, from people that have shared their stories, people that have completed renter surveys, stakeholders, champions, supporting organisations, foundation members and people that have just been really supportive in amplifying and getting this campaign going and maintaining the momentum. And I think this is a really important and exciting opportunity to celebrate that, some of the wins, and look at what we've got coming forward. So to kick us off, I'm going to hand over to Chantal to provide a bit of an overview of where the campaign came about, what we're aiming for, and some of the things that we've achieved to date.
Thank you, Sarah, and acknowledging Anglicare WA's amazing work as an incredible supporter of this campaign, and to all of my colleagues from the Make Renting Fair campaign. I'm going to share my screen because I've got some slides to run you through where we've come from, what we've been up to, and our wins. And so hopefully that's all good now. And thanks again for joining us. It was really exciting to see a lot of new names, new faces join this webinar. And so this webinar very much is pitched at you if you're new to the Make Renting Fair mission. If you're one of the renters that have filled in our survey, and I know there's been a lot that are joining us today, thank you so much. And we really wanted to start from the beginning and let you know what is Make Renting Fair, tell you a bit about our campaign evolution and highlights, talk to you about our achievements and our next steps as well. So I'm going to start off with who are we? Many of you will already know who we are, but we are an amazing alliance or a coalition of all of the key community organisations and peak bodies in Western Australia, as well as people renting their home. And we're just campaigning for better, fairer laws for renters. We've been around since 2019 and we now have grown to 26 members, and it feels like it's growing every day, and it includes 6 peak bodies representing 570 organisations collectively that are providing services to more than 500,000 Western Australians, many of whom are renters. And really proud to also have membership from really great organisations that employ more than 6,000 staff and provide direct services on the ground, as well as the unions WA and United Workers Union. We're so thrilled to have them support our campaign, and it's it's an amazing achievement to have them. When we talk about what the campaign is, fundamental to the campaign is 10 key reforms that we think would achieve, would dramatically improve renters' lives, and they're known as the Tenancy 10. And the Residential Tenancies Act hasn't been reformed since 1987. It's very outdated, not very fit for purpose. And so back in 2019, when the campaign first started, we got together and put out a survey to renters, and We had the most amazing people out in shopping centres and all over the place getting data from renters to ask what would make your life better as a renter. What are the things, if we could get reforms over the line, that would actually make a measurable difference in Western Australia? And the people that first started the Make Renting Fair campaign actually got 890 renters surveyed. So we got the input of almost 1,000 renters that informed what we call the Tenancy 10. So the Tenancy 10 are evidence-based and extremely impactful, and you can find them on our website. And we'll be talking a bit about the Tenancy 10 today, especially in terms of our achievements. So this was our goal. And if you just want to read through them with me, the first was to end unfair evictions. And so that's getting rid of no reason evictions and replacing no reason evictions with a clear prescribed list of reasons you can be evicted. There already are 8. There's very clear reasons to be evicted as there is, but removing the ability to evict anybody without a reason would provide the most, a really modern form of security for renters. Allowing reasonable modifications was our second ask in the Tenancy 10. Creating minimum standards is so important. You have more regulation of the office chair that I'm sitting on than my rental home, and that has to change, and we're really excited about working to get minimum standards over the line. Stabilising rent increases is a massive one of our Tenancy 10. In WA, up until recently, rents could be increased twice a year and with no cap. So we're fighting to change that. That was something that renters have said time and time again that has impacted them, significantly. Boarders, lodgers and students aren't covered by the RTA and are extremely vulnerable. And there's win-win changes that need to be made for boarders, lodgers and students. And it would be really exciting to work in that space in the next tranche of the reforms. Allowing pets. There's a massive pet gap in Western Australia. People who own their own homes, 69% have a pet. But if you rent, there's only just over 1 in 10 rentals where you're actually allowed to have a pet. So we call that the pet gap. And we found in our data that there's almost half of renters that had applied to rent a place with a pet had been refused. The 7th is quick, fair dispute resolution. At the moment, if you've got a bond dispute or if you've got an issue with your landlord, you have to pretty much go to the magistrate's court to sort it out, and that is just not fair and it's not efficient. And so that really needs to change and become much fairer. A better deal for public housing tenants as well, who are under the RTA but who also don't enjoy the same, good minimum standards or any of the things we're talking about. So a better deal for public housing tenants will be part of the next tranche, which would be amazing. Increasing access to tenancy information and advocacy. So our amazing friends at Circle Green and all the community legal centres that provide the most incredible work. We want to help them have more funding and help renters have more access to great advice. And finally, privacy. In Western Australia, I'm subject to a rental inspection every 4 times a year, every 3 months. That's quite frankly pretty hardcore, and we're working to change that. It's very onerous and it's an invasion of privacy, and we're also hearing stories from renters where things are happening during those inspections that I feel like a real breach of privacy. So they're our Tenancy 10, and as I said, they're evidence-based. They're based on almost 1,000 renters surveyed back in 2019, and additionally we've just put our another rental survey out last year, and we've got almost 350 more renters that have added their evidence to that, and we're in the process of updating the Tenancy 10. So here's our fact sheets here. You can read them on our website, and they're all broken down into each of the 10. There's infographics there and what the problem that we've identified and what we're trying to change. So I'm, as a campaigner, really immensely proud of the work that happened before I joined this campaign that led to the development of the Tenancy 10, including, really grounding the voices of lived experience and people out there on the ground, getting the voices of renters to provide the evidence for what is needed in reforms. So it's a perfect model as a campaigner, and that's why I'm so proud to be part of this. So yeah, jump online if you haven't and have a look at our fact sheets on the Tenancy 10, and really proud as well that they'll be updated very soon with all of the new data that we've got coming in. So that gives you a bit of background of where we've come from, but what have we been up to? It's actually been a really busy 12 months. So I'm just going to walk you through what I think are the campaign highlights. So I'm really proud, as I mentioned, we've placed renters' voices at the heart of our campaign. We've also relaunched the WA Renters Survey. So that survey that was around in 2019, that we gathered all of the data that informed the Tenancy 10. So there's 10 reforms we're trying to achieve. We relaunched that last year and have had, as I mentioned, almost 350 responses so far. And they have then formed the basis of 2 reports that we've released and launched and briefed the Minister on and briefed MPs on, and that have had really strong impact. So we're really proud of those reports, and I'll touch on those in a sec. We've also done independent polling, which found that the majority of, vast majority of the community support rental reforms that and support our Tenancy 10, and we are really proud of that. And we like to do things like independent polling, which we think is a bit of a game changer. We've also met the ministers because there have been 3 successive ministers since the reforms were proposed back in 2019. And we're really fortunate and grateful that we've got a great working relationship with Minister Ellery, and we'll continue to work with her going forward. We've also done a blitz with local MPs, backbenchers, and all across the whole political spectrum as well. So far there's 14, and we've got a couple more on Friday, and we'll continue to do that. And we've found overwhelming support and a really steep learning curve as well for lots of the MPs. But that's something we're absolutely dedicated to and really proud of, is our outreach and our advocacy directly with decision makers. We've also produced resources and fact sheets. So online, you can again jump on our website and you can find all kinds of resources and evidence-based fact sheets, including fact sheets that take on the myth and the scare campaign that the Real Estate Institute have been running. So a little bit more about that later, but also I think a great highlight overall is that our campaign continues to grow and grow. We are not going away. We are formidable, and I think it's just really exciting that we've had so much momentum so far, and we're just going to keep going. So to touch, I wanted to just bring to life a couple of those examples of the highlights. And so the first was that I mentioned renters' voices are at the heart of our campaign. So here's the amazing Trish Owen right back at the start. She was one of the people out there getting the stories from renters and really helping with that voice of lived experience and that expertise to shape the Tenancy 10. And that online little portal that we have is just where renters can share their stories. And so if you go online and click on renters stories, right down the bottom you can share yours, and we have people in the campaign that will contact you directly and help you share those stories or on your behalf really impactfully. And Sarah's going to talk about that at the end of our webinar. So we also, I mentioned we relaunched our renters survey. So this is how it looks on the website. It's still live. You can still go in there, and if you haven't, it'd be great, fill it in and share your experience in our survey. And out of that survey, we generated 2 evidence-based reports. The first was on the impact of no reason evictions. So what it's like as a renter having the fear every night of maybe you'll wake up and be evicted without reason the next day or at your next rent renewal. I'm a renter personally, and my renewal is coming up in February, and I'm terrified. I'm really terrified that that's going to be it for me. So I'm very much putting my hand up as one of those renters that are living and breathing the impact of no reason evictions hanging over your head. But the data in that survey is incredible, and we did provide that to the Minister, and we also got some great traction in the media, and it's something we'll continue to work on. The other really impactful report was the impact of rent increases. As I mentioned, rent increases have been allowed twice a year and with no cap. So that report, both of those reports are online and have been, I think, really impactful in terms of getting the reforms over the line that we have. And just to give you a little snippet of the data that is coming out of the report and how we're sharing online, in our rent increases report, we found that 60%, so overwhelming majority, have had at least one rent increase this year, and 85% would find it almost impossible if rents were raised again by 10%, which is what's expected. And 41% had tried to negotiate these increases but were refused. So we've also got examples there of people that are sharing they were too scared to negotiate because they're worried that the landlord will terminate their lease. And also I should mention that these slides and these examples have been shared directly with the Minister and have been really impactful, and backbenchers as well, and her office. We also found another example is that 71% of renters were worried a request for repairs or maintenance would threaten their chance of having the lease renewed. And not only that renters are too scared to ask for their rights, but that they are sharing with us the most frankly diabolical conditions that they're having to endure. And so the quote on the right is one of many in the surveys of people that are just coping with fleas and lights not working and the heater not working. This is so common, and again, it's something, the more evidence we have, the more chance we have of really having a crack at fixing it in the second tranche of reforms. Here's another example of a person who filled in the survey living in regional Western Australia, up in the northern regions, who has been really distressed and got in touch with us because she's seeing in the real estate industry just standard $200 or $300 increases in all lease agreements every single time. And it's been going on for 3 years. And so, that's another example that we shared with the Minister, and we hope will lead to really strong reforms on rent caps coming up soon. So as I said, these stories are really impactful, and they've given us a really great evidence base to release reports. But of course, that's not it. As a campaigner, it's no good having a report sitting on a shelf. The great thing about this campaign is that the mainstream media have become so interested in our plight and in our campaign, and are doing 4-page spreads like this in the Sunday Times, for example, in response to those stories that we've been sharing online. And here's another example. So we've had 2 really huge spreads in the Sunday Times, for example. We've had a heap of op-eds. We've had all major channels cover our stories. It's actually been a dream for our campaign to have such strong support in the media, and we have such a good story to tell. And we've also got incredible principal supporters like Louise at WACOS, being able to share op-eds and opinions like this and having them get a really great run. The other achievement in the media is that we have the editor. So the editorials often run examples like this, which are completely on side for us, and we're all singing the same song. And that's that's a thrill for us as a campaign. It's really exciting to have such support in the media. I also mentioned that we had been meeting with ministers and with MPs, and so this is some of the key members of the steering committee meeting with 7 backbenchers a couple of months ago in Parliament House, and that was a real highlight of our campaign as well, because we learnt that they're very supportive. One of the members was a renter himself, and it just feels like, yeah, they get it and are incredibly supportive and really open to hearing more from us. I also mentioned that a highlight was the fact sheets and resources that we have online. And so here's some examples of how the resources page looks. And I would really encourage you, if you're renting or interested in the campaign, just to jump on and have a look. We've got stuff there on the myth busting. So all of the things we are saying about how the sky will fall in if these reforms go through. We've got some great fact sheets on there and some really detailed research, just kind of pulling apart all of their arguments. We've also got a need help section, because we're starting to get a lot of people that have filled in our survey actually contact us and say, I'm facing eviction, I'm facing a huge rent increase, please tell me what to do. And so we've got like a little portal there that can show you all of the different areas that you can get assistance, including Circle Green and the amazing community legal centres around the regions and around the metro area that provide incredible tenancy advice and support, free of service, and they're a principal supporter of our campaign as well, and we're just so lucky to have them. So they're the highlights of the campaign, and just the last part of my presentation is what we've achieved, and this is where it gets exciting, and also we realise that we've still got a lot of work to do, but we have achieved the first round of reforms. We've secured those. They were finally announced late last month. It was the 26th of May, and that's how the West broke it. And if we remember back to the Tenancy 10, this was our list. So these are the 10 aims that we had. The ones in green are what have been announced as part of the reforms. And so you can see that we secured reasonable modifications. We've secured partially rent increases, so they have been limited to once a year instead of 2 times. Pets are allowed. the dispute resolution process has changed, and we've got a huge amount of an increase in funding to our community legal centres, so an increase in access to advocacy and information for tenants. What I'm going to do now is throw to Sarah's going to help me with some of the details on each of these that were achieved. And are you there, Sarah? Can you chime in?
Yes. Yep.
Excellent.
So I'm just pulling up some info. With this information, unfortunately, Zoe from Circle Green couldn't join us today, but has kindly offered some of the information on the changes. So there were 6 changes that were announced at the end of May, as Chantal mentioned. The big one was prohibiting rent bidding. So that's at the moment, there's currently no rent bidding. And it's where people who are applying for a tenancy are put under pressure to counter offer and offer higher than the advertised rent. So going forward, what we understand with the proposals is that rents will have to be advertised at a fixed amount and not within a range, and landlords can't put pressure, or the real estate agents can't put pressure on people to offer more than is advertised. So that will hopefully help stabilise what has been happening in the market around rent bidding. In terms of also related to the rent increases is the frequency that rents can be increased over a 12-month period. Currently, at the moment, rents can be increased once every 6 months, and there's no limit to what they can be increased by. And other requirements is 60 days notice needs to be given to the tenant if the rent's being increased during a fixed term agreement, and that has to be agreed in writing. But and we're not sure if those changes where the frequency is limited to 12 months will affect public housing tenants. And at the moment, we haven't, which is part of the second tranche we'll be talking about a bit later, there is no plan for rent stabilisation or capping on the amount that it can be increased. So there's no plan at the moment to freeze rents. So that means that even though it's once every 12 months, what could have been $50 every 6 months might be still $100 in the 12 months. So we've still got a bit of work to do, but it's a great first step. The third area was around minor modifications without the property owners or landlord's consent. So at the moment, the tenant, as it stands at the moment, can't make any changes to the property, like hang out pictures or doing any minor modifications to make it their home. But going forward under the proposed changes, they'll be able to make minor modifications without consent, and the landlord will only be able to refuse on particular grounds. So as long as the tenant then can restore the property back to its original condition at the end of the lease. So obviously those certain grounds and more detail about that will become evident as the bill is drafted. The big one, as Chantal mentioned, is the pet gap. So currently at the moment, whether someone can have a pet depends on whether both the property owner and the tenant agree, and it often agreements expressly prohibit pets being allowed in tenancies. So going forward, the tenants will be able to keep pets, and the landlords can only refuse on certain grounds with approval from the Commissioner, I think, or the Consumer Protection around whether the landlord is allergic, or if it's a strata complex and other other prohibited reasons like that. So again, a little bit more information will come out as the drafting of that bill is enabled. The other one, which we didn't have on our list, but for the Tenancy 10, but is actually a really good win for tenants, is that certain disputes, such as bond disputes or disputes about pets and minor modifications, will be referred to the Commissioner for Consumer Protection for determination, which is really good because at the moment, all residential tenancies disputes go through the Magistrates Court. And as everyone online can appreciate, going to court is really adversarial and intimidating and stressful. And tenants often have to represent themselves, and lessors are often represented by property managers or a legal team. So going forward, the proposal of a conciliated conference led by Consumer Protection, where the mediator will be less intimidating. There won't be a judge, there won't be a registrar, it won't be in court, and it'll be a much more efficient and effective conciliation process. So that's actually a really good procedural win for tenants to actually have a bit more courage to be able to access and enforce their rights. And that will also help with the bonds disposal being a bit more streamlined. At the moment, there's lots of forms and it has to go to the bond administrator, and we're hoping that process will be a bit more streamlined for bond disposal as well. The sad thing is, though, and we'll go into this going forward, is that the without grounds is still in there. And that's obviously a really big threat for a lot of tenants in asking for any current rights or things under the law, and certainly any of those proposed changes, asserting and unrequesting those will be still difficult to realise if the without grounds is still in there. So that is something that we're still going to be advocating for as part of that second tranche. So I think, Chantal, was there anything else to go through about those changes? What we'll be doing, if there is particular questions around some of the proposed changes, we understand the changes has to go to drafting and the bill won't come out till probably next year. So if you are finding that you are, we'll talk about that in a minute, but that because of the announcements of the proposed changes, that property managers or landlords are starting to respond and lock things in pre that happening, definitely continue to contact one of the community legal centres where the tenant advocates might be able to assist you. Keep your stories coming in via our website so we can present them to the Commission and the Minister to really share and highlight the impact that the current laws are having. I think that, was there anything else, Chantal, around, the other final thing, sorry, is if you do have questions around things that you might want addressed or a bit more clarity, just pop them in the chat and we're going to collate them and potentially put up a Q&A or whatever, a resource on our website that hopes to be able to respond to some of those. There are also questions then we can collate and bring to the Minister or to the Consumer Protection. And if needed, we can host similar webinars or opportunities in the future.
Exactly.
Anything else, Chantal, on that?
No, that's amazing. Thank you, Sarah, and thanks so much to Zoe, who helped with those notes but just couldn't be here, unfortunately. So, and as Sarah said, any questions you have or any further details, we will provide on a campaign update. So on our website, we do have a campaign update section, and we can also do another workshop where we really drill into some of these things over the next little while the changes are actually being drafted. So yeah, stay tuned. Because we will be providing more information and more responses to any questions that you have. I also just wanted to share with you, we've got an amazing researcher that works here, Rebecca, that went over our survey and helped me prepare for this presentation by looking at how just some kind of really like one, if we could have one example for each of the changes that we secured in the reforms, how does that translate to the data that we've been seeing coming in from our renters? And so I just wanted to share with you that in terms of ending unfair evictions, we found in our survey that 32% of people that had faced eviction in the last 12 months were evicted with no reason. So that is a huge number. That's 1/3 of renters that we're talking about there. That's obviously still in play. In terms of the ones we won, though, in terms of allowing reasonable modifications, Rebecca showed me that on average 44% of everyone that participated in our survey had been refused a minor modification or a disability modification. So almost half are getting refused, and keep in mind the other half aren't even asking because they're so worried about being evicted. In terms of stabilising rent increases, another win for us, so we're halfway there. We've got them reduced to once a year. We're still going to work on caps, but 17% of our survey respondents had 2 or more rent increases in the last 12 months. It's phenomenal. So luckily, when these changes come through, they'll be reduced to 1. But yeah, 17% is pretty mind-blowing. Allowing pets, 42%, as I mentioned before, had been refused a house due to having a pet. So that will change. In terms of the quick and fair dispute resolution, on average, Rebecca said that 41% of our renters had issues and disputes with their landlords that ended up in the magistrate's court. So almost half of renters who have an issue are ending up in court. And so it's such a relief for everybody to know that that is going to be changed and streamlined. It'll just really balance the playing field a lot more as well. And the final one, increasing access to advocacy and information. Up to 70% of our renters had said that they either didn't know what was available or they had tried to contact tenant services but were unable to. And so the additional funding of $9 million over 2 years that the Minister has provided is going to be a significant help for our amazing people working in all of those legal centres that can provide help for the tenants. So that's just kind of a little snapshot of the kind of data that we're getting in, and we can show that it's a material difference, that these changes aren't everything, but they will make a material difference to almost half of the renters we surveyed. So that's exciting. And so then the next slide I've got is just to talk about what was our response to the changes. And so obviously we welcomed those changes, but we were disappointed that no reason evictions weren't included. And so we'll keep working to secure that fundamental reform is achieved this term of government. And really want to acknowledge Anglicare CEO, my CEO, Kath Snell, Celia from Circle Green CEO, and Acting CEO Rach there from Wacos. They're our foundational members of the Make Renting Fair campaign. And that was them on the day that the changes were announced, where we were welcoming the changes, but saying there's obviously more work to do. In a lot of ways, it's great to have all of these reforms happen, but with no grounds eviction still hanging over our heads, it's still really hard for renters out there. So in terms of next steps, this is the exciting part. We get to have a breath. We've got some great changes over the line. We're in a process of regrouping now and planning for 3 different steps. So the first step is just to secure that tranche 1. So all of those things in green, those 5 changes that Sarah just walked you through, are going to be drafted into legislation over the next year, and we're advised that they'll come into effect this time next year. So it's a long wait, but the good thing about that is we'll be right there front and centre and helping them with advice on drafting and making sure we can get those changes as strong as possible for renters. So that's really exciting, and that'll take a lot of work behind the scenes for us. In the meantime as well, whilst we're waiting for those first round of changes to come through, if you've got examples, just keep sending them to us, because we can use those directly with the Commissioner and with the Minister, so that they could maybe do something in the meantime to prevent really bad faith actions by the real estate lobby, for example, or the real estate industry, of locking in, for example, rent increases every 6 months, which they know they're not going to be able to do, but we're seeing a lot of evidence of them starting to do that now. So we can just jump on the phone and hopefully get that addressed whilst we secure those tranche 1 changes. In terms of tranche 2, that's everything else. So that's minimum standards, the rent caps that we would love to see, or some form of stabilisation, boarders, lodgers, students, privacy, and public housing. So there are all of the things left on our tenancy 10 that now we get to help get over the line. We know that that tranche 2 is coming soon. We expect it later in the year for the government to start consulting or releasing what they're intending. And we just think it's such a huge opportunity to secure those. And so that's our task ahead. And the third step is, we've mentioned there is more work to do on unfair evictions. So we'll keep working with that and providing a really good evidence base that ending unfair evictions is actually going to be a win-win for everybody, for landlords and tenants alike. So this was where I was going to hand over to Zoe for more in details, but Sarah's already run you through that, which is great. And so what Sarah is going to do now is talk about what next and how you can actually get involved. So now that we know where we've come from, what we've achieved, and where we're going, so the next 3 parts of our campaign, Sarah's got 2 really clear asks for you. So I'm going to hand over to her, and I'm just going to do the next slide for her. So over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Chantal. Yeah, I think as Chantal mentioned, we've got a lot of, we'll be continuing a lot of work and keeping you updated on the website with updates, campaign updates in our blogs and obviously via social media. But there's 2 asks that we're asking everyone online and anyone that you know that is renting. The first and really important one is to share your experiences to help us secure that first tranche of proposed changes that we've just outlined, and any evidence that you might be experienced to the contrary to those reforms. And the second is around helping us starting to collect and build that evidence to highlight the impact of not having rent caps and the need for rent caps, minimum standards. Particularly interested in hearing from stories from students and around what their experiences as renters, boarders and lodgers, and anything in relation to privacy being disturbed, and obviously anything related to the without grounds. So one of the things that we're doing, the way you can share your story is through our website portal, just putting in name, postcode and email, and a few dot points and even a photograph of the situation, and particularly if it's around minimum standards and what's happening in your tenancy that's not being repaired. Someone from our team will connect with you. We have a team member from Anglicare and from Shelter that are collating the stories, and we're going to be looking at really different ways to amplify and share your story. So it may be in the paper, in the newspaper or the media and the radio, but if that's not for you, like I know that a lot of people may be a bit wary or frightened that it might affect their current tenancy, we're going to be using stories in a really different and creative way. So it might be that we share quotes, we share pictures of the situation, we might share it through social media, we might do mini videos, we might do quizzes or anything that might help amplify what's happening and what's being experienced out there in Western Australia for tenants. And in terms of media, we do have some media training and support that we're going to be able to provide as well for those that are keen to share your story wide and large, and someone will be there that can help provide that. The second is getting ready to participate in some research, some citizen-led research. We've got colleagues that are collecting what it is like to experience renting in the summer and the winter. So we've missed the winter window, but we're looking at really getting a good WA cohort and representation in a summer renter research project. We had Rosa participate last year, and it really shows the need for those minimum standards and environmental impact and health impacts in poorly maintained tenancy. So they're the 2 things: share your story and look out for participating in our next research project. So that brings us to the end of the Snap briefing. Again, thank you so much for everything that you've done to contribute to the campaign and for getting it to walking with us to achieve the things that we have achieved. And we really look forward to your continued support so we can see the rest of the Tenancy 10 realised. And obviously continue popping your questions in there in the chat. We're going to pull them together, and some of the more nuanced one we'll put up on as an update on the website, and look forward to providing another briefing to you soon. Thanks, everyone.